Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of We Should Talk, the online podcast where you can go to listen to my good friend Mr. Senator and I talk about things that we should talk about. How you doing, Mr. Senator?
Happy New Year. How are you, Solaris?
I'm doing okay. I'm pretty cold up here in Ohio. It's pretty chilly.
Well,
The
I
local
imagine
river
so.
here is I think it's freezing over. I think it's almost completely frozen over now, which is a little scary. And it's just really plain cold. Now, where you are, you're a little further south, and is it pretty cold down there?
Oh, it's a very warm and inviting 30 degrees here, with a wind chill zero, with a
Oh.
wind chill zero.
Oh, you know,
So yeah, it's wonderful here.
it's a
But
veritable
I
summer
thrive
down
in
there.
this weather. I love this weather. So, oh, it is. It is. I mean, you could try to go out in your bathing suit and try to get a tan.
There
I
are
wouldn't
people.
advise it, but
There
you
are
know,
people.
Some people.
And you know what? You know what, Mr.
So what's
Senator?
going on?
I am outraged.
Yes.
I'm outraged, you know? About this
You and
winter.
so many others lately, I tell you.
In fact, that's the topic for today. Americans love to be outraged about
It is.
something.
We do. And I wanted to, like I explained to you earlier, this subject sort of came up in the latest controversy regarding Melissa Harris Perry, who's a weekend host on MSNBC. Comments that her panel and she made regarding Mitt Romney's adopted grandson, who is a black baby, and the comments made, there was a large outrage and uproar regarding her comments. I can't count the number of segments, and I'm not even a frequent or regular viewer of CNN, but in just clicking through and stopping on CNN, they have dedicated full segments to this incident. Of course, Fox had something to say about it. So it became sort of this big thing. And this isn't sort of an isolated incident. As recently, just going back maybe a month and a half, 2 months, there has been a litany of these sort of cases where an on-air personality made a comment either off the air or on the air, and it ignites into this huge outrageous, or what I would call manufactured outrage, or this incident of manufactured outrage, where people would take these comments and run with them and use them to either get the host fired, or to create a narrative about a network at large, or to talk about sort of some of our national social issues and tied in with religion. So the cases that I have for you, Solaris, that I'm speaking very specifically of, is, I mentioned Melissa Harris Perry, the Martin Bashir incident with Sarah Palin, where Martin Bashir ultimately ended up resigning. Go ahead.
I think, well, if you go ahead and finish your list there, but you should actually, I'm actually not familiar with some of these controversies. I've heard, of course.
I will explain. I will explain them.
I've heard of the Melissa Harris Perry.
I will explain them once I list them. Okay. And we have Martin Bashir, and we have Alec Baldwin, who was fired from his Friday night weekly program for making some allegedly homophobic comments off the air. Then we had the Phil Robertson issue, the Duck Dynasty bit, about what he said about as a man of faith, and about homosexuality and adultery and all that other good stuff. And then the comments that Rush Limbaugh made about Pope Francis, the Marxist comment, basically calling him a Marxist. And so these are the things. So I explained the Melissa Harris Perry matter. So here's what happened. What happened was, she had a program. It wasn't this past Saturday, but the Saturday before. And she does. Sometimes I watch a show, sometimes I don't. As a matter of fact, I didn't watch this particular show when it was originally aired. I actually watched the segment after the whole thing blew up. But she does like the segment where she shows pictures, and her panel and she will caption the pictures. Sort of a normal segment. A lot of programs do this. Well, in this particular program, she had a picture of, they got access to Mitt Romney's family Christmas card thing. People send out Christmas cards every year with their family portrait and things of that nature. And in this, it was him and his wife Ann and all their grandchildren in the picture. And in the picture, Mitt Romney, on his lap, he has a baby, a black baby, who is his newly adopted grandson. One of his sons just adopted the baby. And of course, on the panel, when she asked the panel to caption it, one of the panelists sang a song called "One of These Things Is Not Like the Other," and I'm not familiar with the song, but apparently it's some song. And another panelist made a comment about how this was sort of a representation of blacks in the Republican Party at the RNC, and so basically it was like a huge laughing stock. They had a good time with the picture. So of course, after the segment, there was a huge blow up. Twitter makes these things, sort of blows these things up beyond what it would normally blow up, say 10 years ago. But huge controversy. People were outraged. They say it's offensive to the Romney family, that it's offensive to mixed marriage families or families that have children that are not of the same race, and that it's indicative of sort of the spiteful hatred and sort of the classlessness of the network itself, MSNBC, and the hosts who, as I'll explain a little later on, who have in recent weeks been a part of sort of a lot of controversies regarding some of the things that they have to say.
Yeah.
So, Solaris. And, part of this is actually seeing the segment and getting sort of a gut feeling about how this segment went.
Right.
But just in hearing what happened, what do you think? Is this something to be outraged about, or is this one of those things where this is what people do on television, and
Well, for one thing,
it is what it is.
If anybody were to see that picture outside of television, you better believe that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be talking about it, like, oh, hey, look, one of these things is not like the other, right? That's actually a pretty common thing that people say. It sounds like Melissa Harris Perry, and again, I haven't seen the episode, but apparently you don't need to see the episode to be outraged about everything.
Right.
You don't need to see it to be outraged. That's probably maybe the subtitle of this. It sounds like she was not making fun of anyone, except maybe the Republican Party. It sounds like they were trying to talk about the role or the I don't know, inclusiveness of the Republican Party. I don't know. It doesn't sound like they were. Now, see, it doesn't sound like they were actually making fun of the kid. And I think, from what I understand, a lot of the news articles were saying that it made it sound like Melissa Harris Perry was actually attacking the kid, and that they were calling on her to apologize to the kid.
And yeah.
And now I don't know. Did she make any comments directed toward the child?
No, and that's the big thing. So, of course, when these stories get reported, you put the name of the host, and you put the name of the host in the headline because you want people to click on it.
Of course.
So Melissa Harris Perry, such and such, with the Romney fan. But if you watch the segment, Melissa Harris Perry she didn't sing the song, and then she didn't make the comment about the RNC either. It was another panelist.
I see.
What she did say was that it would be funny if in 30 years Kanye West and Kim Kardashian's baby got married to Mitt Romney's grandson, and then Mitt Romney would be related to Kanye West. She was making sort of an offhand kind of funny remark about that. She did say that.
Okay. And
all of that sort of became a problem for a large segment of people.
The thing is, I guess this is good that I haven't actually seen this segment, because all I remember is everybody saying that, she was making fun of that particular kid. And then everybody was outraged because, and I think the headline, the news headline was, MSNBC host Melissa Harris Perry makes fun of Romney's black grandson. Well, that sounds pretty bad. What the heck's she saying about this kid? Why would she be saying something about that? And why does this kid have to be, now the subject of ridicule? That doesn't make any sense. And now that you're describing it to me, it sounds like, the kind of normal comments that commentators would make. I mean, if you're going to be outraged about something, there's a whole lot more you could be outraged about in this country besides what one host doesn't say. But the commentators who are on that host show says, I don't know. My understanding is that she had to make a full apology, and that Mitt Romney accepted the apology.
And that, Solaris, I think, is probably the one sort of silver lining in this whole issue, and probably should be the template for every forthcoming controversy based on a comment made by an on-air personality or whatever. Because Melissa Harris Perry went on her program and gave a tearful apology, and that was that. She didn't make any equivocation. She didn't try to justify what went on at the panel. She just apologized straightforward. She explained her story, meaning she explained that she comes from a Mormon white family. She was, I guess, reared up or raised in that environment as well. So she speaks from she wasn't speaking from a derisive place. She was heartfelt. She gave an apology, and Mitt Romney, in turn, even though Chris Wallace, because I watched that Fox segment, Chris Wallace tried to push Romney and asked him at least 3 or 4 questions on this, and I thought it was ridiculous. He asked one question, Mitt Romney answered and said, "I accept her apology, it was heartfelt, and I'm moving on, there's no ill feelings." That should have been it, but Wallace kept asking questions. But Romney, in turn, accepted the apology.
Yes, and that
is the template. That is the template.
And you're absolutely right. It should be the template, but I think you're also getting at kind of the underlying reason why this kind of stuff sparks outrage, and why you found a lot of the outrage on the two competitors' networks, Fox News and CNN. The reason why a lot of this stuff becomes outrage is because on the Twitterverse blows up, but it's not until you get into the mainstream media where you start actually having something become a controversy. If CNN's specialty is being outraged about stupid stuff. So let's take a moment. Let's talk about how bad CNN is, okay? Really, really bad news. I don't know whether they lean left or whether they lean right. They seem to be really confused on kind of what their general principles are, but the thing that seems to really identify CNN is its low quality reporting. It's low quality news. Jon Stewart did a fantastic he made fun of them in a parody of CNN. He had all of his correspondents go out to some street that was outside of CNN's headquarters, and all of these different correspondents, all the crazy correspondents they've got on there, John Oliver, what's her name, something B, I can't remember her name, Samantha B, I think is her name, and they're out there, and all basically they're doing is they're saying, "Oh my God, John, oh my God, we've got a story here, here's the story," and the whole story was them being outside a building that had the CNN on it. There was no story, right? And that was exactly what CNN does all the time. It's outrage that people are in the street, looking up at this building, and it's exactly what CNN does. The other day, I was in the gym. I don't have cable, but I was in the gym, and I was watching cable when I was running, and I saw this CNN program on. First of all, I saw CNN, just kind of rolled my eyes because I knew this was pretty much garbage anyway. But it confirmed my suspicions the moment they started talking about this Lorde song. Have you heard this Lorde song controversy?
Royals, yes,
yeah,
I did hear it. But explain it for the audience.
Right. Now, so Royal's song is, as far as I understand it, about people who don't get caught up in the kind of lavish lifestyles of the rich and famous. Now, that seems to be the basic... Am I wrong on that? Isn't that basically what Royals is all about? Royals?
Basically, yeah.
Right, okay. Mm-hmm. Now, CNN had this segment comes on, it says, "Is Lorde racist? oh my God, we have some Americans who are outraged by this song, and they're calling the Royals song racist. It's really about racism. That's really what it is. She's saying something about black people or whatever it is, and it's like, what? If these people listen to this song, I mean, you're really stretching to even get close to the idea this is a racist song. And I mean, that wasn't even like racially insensitive. That just didn't even have anything to do with race. And then you go back to like Miley Cyrus when she was, shaking her butt on television, and she was doing so. I forget what the big performance was. Maybe they used the MTV performance where she was also,
I think it was the MTV. Yeah.
She had some performers on stage who were African American, and they were twerking, and she was like smacking their butt, and apparently people were saying this was very racist, and that it was she was basically taking black culture and just making it look awful and all this other stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, this isn't okay. Who's the racist if you say this is black culture? First of all, who's the person who's making these statements about black people? You say that twerking is black culture? Come on, Miley Cyrus is a white girl, right? She's twerking. It's not black culture. Anyway, it's the whole thing, the whole outrage machine about stupid stuff like this. I think underlying all of this is the news media. They need something to talk about. People need something to talk about. They need something to fill the airwaves. They've got 24/7. Right now, let's do a little test. Let's do a little practice here. Okay, so I'm going to be quiet for 10 seconds, and this is what media. Think about it. All 10 seconds have to be filled by CNN, by MSNBC, by Fox, and all the other CBS, all the other people. They have to fill the following 10 seconds with shit. Okay, garbage, total junk. You ready? This is what it would be like for them to have to actually not be on the airway for 10 seconds, okay? Here we go. Okay, and in that 10 seconds, we have to be outraged about something because we can't quite figure out what to fit in every 10 seconds every single six times every minute, and for 60 minutes, so 6 times every hour, 36 times every hour total, and then 12 hours a day. We've got to fill the airwaves with stuff, with junk. And if it's a slow news cycle, if there's nothing to talk about, this is what gets filled. It's outrage about Miley Cyrus, an outrage about Lorde, an outrage about Melissa Harris Perry, an outrage about Martin Bashir, which was just kind of a disgusting comment he made. Maybe that's what you want to move on to.
Well, before I get to that, I want to comment on what you just said. I think that this manufactured outrage that's festered or fostered by the media is the equivalent of sort of negative advertisement. And what I mean by that is, in political ads, people, if you poll people today, if you look at any polls going back to the beginning of polling, and you ask people what they thought of negative advertisement, negative political ads, they would say that they're bad, that they don't approve of them, that they hurt the democratic process and the political system, and they don't want to have anything to do with them. They're sick of looking at them on their television and whatnot. But people are drawn, but they work.
That's right.
Because people are drawn to the dark side, if you will. And sort of the manufactured outrage, people are drawn to controversy. Even when it's stupid, people are drawn to it because it conjures up passions about whatever, and you can stand on one side or the other and scream at the other side from your position. And even though you would never, if somebody polled you and asked you, what do you think about Phil Robertson's comments about blah, 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 they give you one thing and may even give you the shrug of the shoulders. but they're also going online and reading every single piece of everything that's written about this story and commenting in the comment section and watching the news every time the segment comes up, because the news is, leading with this story. And so they're telling one story with their behavior and their actions, and they're saying something else with their mouth. And it's the same difference as with the political ads. And that's the unfortunate thing about it, and why we won't ever see an end to issues like these, because people are drawn to this stuff.
Well, and that
it's a lot easier to talk about what?
Go ahead.
Depressed? No, I was just going to say it's a lot easier to talk about. It's a lot easier to talk about why you're upset about Melissa Harris Perry's panel poking fun at Mitt Romney's grandchild, or Martin Bashir making very inappropriate comments about Sarah Palin, and Alec Baldwin shooting off at his mouth, which is typical. I don't even know why that became an issue, because Alec Baldwin, that's what he does. And on and on and on. It's a lot easier to get caught up in that than it is to get caught up in yet another tale about a pending government shutdown.
Right.
Or, the state of the real estate economy, and sort of all the various complex things that are not at this moment attached to political discourse or talking points, because they haven't been developed yet, because it's not close enough to an election.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to get caught up in all that stuff.
And I don't know whether it's.
Go ahead.
I don't know whether it's a distraction or whether it's some kind of venting mechanism. I don't know whether it's some people you can think of it like, well, if I'm I don't know, Fox News or CNN, I'd like to distract from the fact that, at least for CNN's perspective, they just have terrible news. They have nothing to offer. They're just bad. And they'd love to distract, and keep people from thinking about, also...
They got good documentaries, though.
They do have good documentaries, actually, but that's because they actually spend time and effort and money on these documentaries. But also for people, just people at the water cooler, right? It's a distraction. You're focused so heavily all the time on these controversial political subjects. People get tired of talking about politics. They get tired of talking about culture and society and religion, and all these different things that can be very tense. And these talking points, they become, or these controversies, kind of outrage, manufactured outrages, they kind of provide a way for everybody to kind of sit back and like, oh yeah, did you hear what happened with Miley Cyrus? And oh yeah, then Martin Bashir, But then there's another part of me that thinks that maybe it's some kind of venting mechanism, and that maybe there's this kind of like these outrages are these kind of tip of the iceberg. Like, you ever have a conversation with somebody and you're just talking to them and you say something that's maybe inconsiderate or whatever it is, and the person just blows up at you. It just blows up. And you're like, what'd I say? I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, I apologize for what I said, but I didn't think it would be worth, hanging up on me, or, this big deal, or, and I find out that a lot of times it's because what I've said is kind of gets at a wound, a very deep emotional wound that people have experienced, and it becomes what I've gotten is the tip of the iceberg. You might also use the metaphor, the straw that broke the camel's back. And sometimes I think some of these outrages, people are just so sick of something that finally it happened. If somebody says something just slightly too far, and all these pent-up feelings about a particular host or a particular person or society in general. I think the Miley Cyrus stuff is not really about Miley Cyrus. I think that is about society's pent-up frustration with maybe the quality of pop music and what it represents. This kind of photoshopped, fake, BS, highly sexualized culture that a lot of people live in. I mean, it's kind of the anti Jennifer Lawrence, right? Jennifer Lawrence kind of stands against part of why she's so popular, I think, and maybe why kind of consistent with this whole venting mechanism theory, is that she stands against things like that. She tries to be an ordinary person. She doesn't put on fake personas, and she's very popular because she openly tells people that she's been photoshopped in magazines and asks magazines not to do that because it gives people a false image. And so I look at Miley Cyrus and I see the whole twerking thing, and I see maybe the whole accusation of her, misappropriating black culture is really a frustration among I think I read this story, and by the way, it was a magazine written by African Americans. Maybe it was a venting. Maybe it was legitimate concerns about white artists misappropriating black artists and getting the credit for it, and popularizing.
And there is a very real history of that.
Yeah, exactly. So that could be a venting mechanism, right? Now, how does that explain people who have no knowledge of that history, whose history, that's totally foreign to them? Like I had no knowledge of that. I mean, as far as I know, I like all kinds of music, and I don't care what the origins were. It doesn't matter to me. But other people, I think maybe the Miley Cyrus twerking thing was about, this has just crossed a line. Pop culture needs to chill out a little bit and stop overly sexualizing everything. And I got to say that I personally, that's something that I can connect with, because I listen to pop music and I listen to pretty much any music, and it's constant sexuality. It's like people forgot how to write a song that actually meant something other than, oh, I fell in love, and oh, my heart's broken, and oh, let's do it, baby. I mean, how many pop songs can you turn on the radio and listen for 4 or 5 hours and mark the number of pop songs that do not talk about sex in some way? And I bet you've got, less than a handful. And it's just everything is about sex. And so I can see now, Miley Cyrus being an outrage is part of a venting mechanism. What she did was the tip of an iceberg. It was a straw that broke the camel's back. There's a lot of people who had different reasons why they were upset with that. So, for example, I think with maybe Martin Bashir, which, by the way, people don't know, Martin Bashir basically said somebody should shit in Sarah Palin's mouth because she had said something similar or something like that. I'm not even sure what the reason he said that. It was clearly inappropriate.
She made a comment and basically said that if slavery, something about, she compared the Affordable Care Act with slavery and said that it wasn't racist. And then he went on a very long self-righteous soliloquy about a story from way back when about a slaver wrote a book, and he wrote a story about defecating and pissing and all of other stuff in a slave's mouth, and he compared and said maybe somebody should do that to her. It was yeah.
Well,
a bridge too far. A couple bridges too far.
You don't go that far. Clearly, he was trying to make a point. I think his point was well made, but I think at the same time it ended up getting him in more trouble. And so the prudent thing to do would be to not say that. But the point is that people probably have that frustration with Martin Bashir going forward. And so the venting mechanism, you could say that either it's outrage because CNN's trying to distract from its really shitty reporting, or Fox is trying to basically continue to gather market share over the media, over that particular, people who are interested in politics and whatnot, and people who watch the news because they're competitors of MSNBC. Or really it's all of their audience wants to vent about MSNBC. They have a beef with MSNBC. And for some reason, if they're watching Fox, odds are they're probably not watching MSNBC, given the very different political affiliations of those two organizations. So I guess you could say it's a distraction. You could also say it's a venting mechanism.
I agree with you. I also think there is a slight element of entitlement. And what I mean by that is we get outraged, and because we're outraged or we take offense to something that's said, we feel entitled to something. And that something may very well be, because I'm offended, you should lose your job, or you should be punished in some way because I'm offended by that. And that sort of breeds. Once you get a victory, once you see one victory in this regard, once you see Don Imus get fired from the
Yes.
network. Of course, later on he gets the job just like 6 months later, which you knew was going to happen,
He was
which
taking a
makes it even
vacation.
more ridiculous. But once a Don Imus gets, yeah, basically, yeah, he was taking a nice little vacation. But once a Don Imus gets fired from the network, people feel emboldened. So whenever, and then of course on the right, once something is said on the left, then they're calling for equal treatment for someone on the left who says something. And then if you're on the left and you hear something from somebody said on the right that you didn't particularly care for, then you feel emboldened by what happened to Imus that you can exert the same sort of influence on his employers. And so you have this back and forth in trying to get people thrown off the air because somebody said something that you didn't like. And you feel entitled to be able to exert your influence, even though you are not a natural constituent. Meaning, I'll give you an example. Remember the whole tiff about when Limbaugh said that about Sandra Fluck, and it was like this big old thing, and that's where the War Women thing came up. Yeah. I gag whenever I say that phrase, but that's where it came from. You know, and people were calling for Rush Limbaugh to get thrown off the air. He called her, he did a slut shaming or whatever. And I'm sitting there thinking, why isn't it enough for you as an individual to not support Limbaugh by not listening to his program? Why isn't that enough of a protest that you have to have him thrown off the air simply because you don't like what he's saying? But then there are millions of other people who agree with what he's saying, and they want him on the air. Why isn't it enough that in Phil Robertson's case, here's another example. I thought what he said was ridiculous. I thought it was crude. And in his case, I don't think it was a big deal because A&E made their own decision in suspending him, and he's back now anyways. It was suspended for 2 weeks, another vacation. But in their case, it wasn't a matter of, you know, the Twitterverse or whatever petitions A&E fire Phil Robertson. They kind of just, they're a private company. They can do what the hell they want to do. But why isn't it enough as someone who's offended, especially if somebody offers an apology? And that's, you know, that's a biggie. But even if they don't offer an apology, why isn't it enough, Solaris, that you just don't support that individual financially by not watching their program, by not listening to it, encouraging people, encouraging friends and family or whatever, don't listen to the program. Why isn't that enough?
I'll tell you. I mean,
why
I'll play
is it that
devil's
we have to
advocate
go
here.
to their employer and say, we want them gone? Go ahead.
I'll play devil's advocate because people feel like there's an injustice in letting that person continue to spew the filth that they do. I think they care. They care very deeply. And you think about the Sandra Fluke is a pretty good example. Rush Limbaugh did not apologize. And this is, of course, not the first time that Rush Limbaugh has said something that people have, and I'm not going to weigh in on this, but I'm going to say people have accused him of being racist, sexist, you name it. Okay? Long list of names and labels that people would give to Rush Limbaugh. I'm not passing judgment. I have my own opinion. I'm going to leave that out for the moment. But, you know, he says something like that. It wasn't just him, some commentator, saying something on the air. This was a national debate. This was part of a woman who went to Congress to testify about a bill that was about ready to be passed. And so when that's happening, it's not just a matter of people being outraged by some rude and crude kind of shock jock, which is probably what I would classify Rush Limbaugh as. It's that this is people feel like it becomes a rallying cry, a cause for the bill itself. These are the kind of people that are out there opposing this bill. It becomes a symbol for the opposition, and so the outrage is not just with the host; it's with the entire opposition to the bill. It's with it's this idea, you call it the war on women, right? That's the outrage. That's what people were feeling. They felt like
I didn't call it that. They did.
No, right, exactly. They called it a war on women because they felt like women were under siege. They felt like these kind of to kind of explain it the way they would, that these kind of old males who are rich beyond belief sit up there on their soapboxes and they say things about women like they know what it's like when they don't, and that they are in no position to say something, especially somebody as powerful and as unfortunately persuasive in certain segments of this country as Rush Limbaugh. They feel like all of a sudden when he says something like that, they now have a duty, an obligation to rise up, to oppose injustice, to oppose the people who sit out there and speak. Now, I mean, you know, what if Rush Limbaugh? What if this were back in the 50s? You know, and there was a Rush Limbaugh, and there were many Rush Limbaughs on the air in 1950s as well, 1940s. You know, 1960s, in the civil rights era. There were lots of people who were probably opposing civil rights legislation and saying outrageous things about African Americans and being very racist on the air. Now, you wouldn't go back and accuse those people of kind of fabricating outrage. I mean, those people were outraged, and they were not just outraged at the commentators. They felt like they were standing up for, you know, against injustice. So that's my devil's advocate response, is that, you know, why are they...
Okay, so...
Go ahead.
Oh, well, my response to that is, in the Rush Limbaugh situation, I'm not defending what he said, and I'm not saying what he said wasn't wrong or foolhardy. As a matter of fact, I wrote a piece on it once upon a time ago and said just that. I thought it was pretty ridiculous what he had to say. My point is that you can feel an injustice, and injustice. The word, I don't like that word, because he didn't commit a crime. You know, you may feel it was an injustice, but that doesn't justify you going to his employer and trying to get his employer to drop him because you didn't like what he said. And that was my point. My point is not, why are you upset about what he said? My point is, why isn't it enough for you to be upset, and then for you as an individual to choose not to support him? And
because
that be your protest.
Right.
That be your statement.
Because it'd be the equivalent of just sitting down and being quiet about it. And these people don't see that as enough.
No, it wouldn't.
I mean,
that wouldn't be the equivalent of sitting down and not being quiet about it.
You know, I mean, if you
to me, that is a very deliberate, and this is the thing. This is what makes it problematic for me, because, yeah, in this case, because they're not the part of his listenership, because they don't listen to his program, they sit from a place where they can basically, they're not invested in it. So it would very well seem like, okay, well, they're not really doing anything. They already aren't listening to his show. They're already not buying any merchandise, right, you know, off of his website.
So what do you do?
So therefore, if they just kept doing that would be them not doing anything. And I would say that's all the more reason why they should just be offended and get over it and keep moving.
See, but like I said, I think
he's not talking to them.
Part of the issue is that, again, we're conflating the action to support a bill with people who were upset and outraged over his comments about Sandra
Yeah,
Fluke.
But they weren't supporting the bill. They actually wanted him. They wanted him to go off the air.
That's true, but I'm saying I think
they were calling advertisers and saying, get him off the air.
I think it was all part of the same. It all came from the same place. It all came from the same general upsetness about these people, about the way that people talk about women, about the way that our rules treat women, about the way that our laws either support or don't support women. I think that's generally where it comes from. I mean, think about it this way. I think if you think about the injustice as every day, there's this guy who sits out there on the public airways saying trash, influencing people and convincing people of certain things that you vehemently disagree with. Is it really just enough if you really believe in the things that you believe, and you really are offended, and you're offended not because you just are offended by things, but because this person is saying things that counter your own principles, that go against the very things that you stand for, is it really just enough for you to not listen? It's not, because you're convinced that this person's soapbox is actually moving the goalpost forward against your cause. And so the only reaction, the only thing that makes sense, if you are somebody who takes action, if you are somebody who is truly offended and you actually really are upset about what that person is proposing, the only response is do something about it. Try to get this person off the airwaves. Try to, you think about it. I think if you're the opposition to Rush Limbaugh,
there's my problem.
You see Rush Limbaugh as a polluter. He's polluting. You don't just not purchase products from a polluter. You actively try to prevent them from polluting. And by the way, this goes back to the Phil Robertson Duck Dynasty stuff. A&E has free speech rights too, as do all of the people who oppose Rush Limbaugh and all the people who ask and call up the advertisers from Rush Limbaugh shows and say, I am not going to support your company. I'm not going to buy your products at the store because you continue to pay money to a program to support causes that I do not believe in and causes that I think hurt this country. I believe it is my duty to not only oppose, to not listen to this person, to not listen to his radio, but to oppose him and his message in every single way I can.
I think that all the way up to the point where you are calling someone's employer and asking them to be fired because you had a problem with what they said is fine. All the way up to that. But I think that is, to me, that, in my opinion, going to that extreme based on whatever was said, whether it be a trend of something that was said or just one incident, that right. there is a element of entitlement attached to that I have a problem with. And that's me on all sides, on just about every instance that you can think of where someone has gotten in trouble for something stupid they said. I just have a real problem with individuals being punished for saying dumb things.
I would agree with...
Or believing dumb things. I think that taking offense to that is an individual's right. I think if they want to speak out against that, that is their right. But there's a difference between saying, I don't like what my coworker just said, it was offensive to me, to go into your, and it wasn't necessarily directed to you, it was just said, to go into your boss and saying, I will not work with this individual anymore. They have to be fired because I was offended by what they said. To me, I think that's a bridge too far. I think that's to the extreme. I think at some point you just have to get over what they said, and maybe you say to them, that offended me, and that be that. But there's a difference between that offended me and I'm going to go tell the boss and I'm going to make sure you lose your job because that offended me.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big difference, though. I like your employer analogy, but I think that it's difficult to use because your colleague is not somebody with the bullhorn pushing a political agenda that you find antithetical to your beliefs. I mean, if they're just kind of...
What if they are?
What's that?
What if they belong... What if your colleague belongs to the Man-Boy Love Association, which is legal, perfectly legal, and maybe they have said something, and maybe you were, molested as a child or something, and they said something that, it just hurt you to your core. That doesn't mean that person should be fired because you were offended by what they belong to or what they say. I mean, it's just an extreme example, but
I think that kind of proves my point. I mean, if you got somebody at work who is standing up with a bullhorn and talking and trying to convince everybody that child molestation is okay, then I think that I think it's reasonable for you to say, holy cow, not only do I think this guy is inappropriate, but and probably
Okay,
is a guy,
maybe
statistically speaking.
not the man boy love say, because that's kind of illegal. maybe not the man boy, but maybe he's a friggin' NRA nut. I mean, it could be anything. You could put any issue in there that you would go, wait a minute now, I don't like what you just said.
But when
you couldn't construe it as hateful necessarily. Yeah. It's just the position they have.
But when you're at work, that person, that individual, does not have does not have a talk show, right? They're not just sitting there for hours spouting beliefs to people who are likely to be influenced or kind of sort of buy into what the person's saying. You don't believe that person at work
right.
is going to influence the politics of the country. Now, maybe what you're saying is it doesn't really matter whether it's the politics of the country being influenced at a in a multi-state media syndicate or something. It could be done at the work level too. I just think that it's a big difference if you're talking about a Rush Limbaugh, comparing a Rush Limbaugh or comparing a Martin Bashir or somebody who has a national stage to just some colleague who's just kind of a guy who just stands up there and just starts spouting off his political beliefs. Like, yeah, I'm not going to try to get that guy fired unless it's causing a problem for the company just because I disagree with them. But if there's somebody on the airwaves saying, I don't know, I believe in man-boy love and we should all love man-boys, or we should all love little boys, I'm going to be like, okay, if you're an advertiser on this guy's radio network, I'm not supporting you. Like, I am not gonna buy your products because you have chosen to sell your advertisements to buy ad time on a ridiculous station, right? Like, protest is important. I believe in protest. We had an episode, I think it was last episode, we talked about economic inequality, and I spent pretty much the entire time talking about how much it irritates me that people who are supposedly anti-big government, supposedly conservative, supposedly don't want to raise taxes, supposedly don't like welfare, go out and spend all their money at places that pay their workers so little that those workers are subsidized by the federal government. It blows my mind that these people can have those two things going on at the same time. It's like, why don't you stand up and protest? Why don't you actually take those beliefs and don't just have those beliefs, do something about those beliefs? And so I can't, in this episode, then come back and be like, you know what? I think it's okay for people to just leave it alone. Just don't buy. Just don't watch. Just
that
whatever.
Would be very Mitt Romney of you, Solaris.
Well,
that would be very Mitt Romney of you.
I
think we have a difference of opinion on scale, and I think that's where our disagreement is. I'm pretty absolutist on the issue, regardless of scale.
Yeah.
And I think we know where each other are coming from. It's just a matter of just fundamentally disagreeing with what the action is, what the response to the outrage should be.
I am outraged at this conversation, and I'm going to call up your employer, and I am going to tell them that they should fire you and that they should no longer give you ad time. In fact, I protest this program. This program is outrageous. This program should be shut down.
Well, that would be a list of 0 if you want to call our advertisers for this program. I think if you want to call our advertisers, I think you're shit out of luck, because you basically got to call my electric company and have them shut my lights off and my electricity off so I can't power my laptop to get on the laptop and speak. That's how much power you have over me on this program.
I guess
I gotta say, it's kind of liberating. I can say whatever the hell I want.
That's the one advantage of being like a Rush Limbaugh is you don't really care about who your advertisers are, because there's so many people who listen to your program. Somebody is going to advertise, and you have so much money that it doesn't really matter if you really have advertisement. So I guess, but
and I hate that the Rush Limbaughs and the Martin Bashirs, and I hate that they put me in a position where I have to defend them, even if I don't have to defend what they say. But I am constantly defending their right to say what they say and still be gainfully employed, and people can be offended all they would like to be. But I hate that they put me in a position by saying dumb things.
Well, maybe you should think about that, Mr. Senator. Maybe you should think about that. I wanted to actually add one point before we kind of ended the episode. But you know what?
I take pride. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I got a whole different point I want to make.
No, I was just going to say I take pride in being consistent on this issue. It's the one issue that I think feeds into, and I think you make a valid point. There is a difference between sort of instances where it's sort of just very frivolous. The outrage is manufactured. It's goofy. The Melissa Harris Perry is a good example of that.
Right.
I also think that the Alec Baldwin thing is a part of that, because it was all based on sort of a reporter's account, and apparently it's all alleged, but it was enough that the people just said that you can't have the job. You too much. And I guess there were other reasons attached to the reason why Alec Baldwin got fired, but his ratings were terrible or whatever.
Yeah. It was MSNBC, probably. They probably
I think there's a point there.
Yeah, I
and I don't know why they gave him the job anyway, but that's a whole other discussion.
I don't know. I don't know exactly what his attempt at the show was, but it was boring. It was at a weird time. It wasn't even consistent.
A paycheck.
Well, yeah, probably, and a way that MSNBC can say that they're having Alec Baldwin on their station, but then he's just a notorious liberal, and once again plays right into the whole idea. The station is other than Morning Joe, their token conservative. The station is completely dominated by left-wing ideology. But I think you're right in that I think there is a difference between stupid comments that people make and comments that are not stupid, but they're clearly intentioned. I think that Rush Limbaugh falls into the category of somebody who doesn't really make stupid mistakes. He just says kind of what he really thinks, and you can't say that he's inconsistent on these issues. He's been saying the same things for years and years and years, and he's been consistently offensive to many people. He doesn't seem to care. That seems to give boost to his ratings. People seem to like the fact that he's raw and uncensored, and but then there's people like Melissa Harris Perry, who doesn't even appear to have really said anything that's offensive at all, but apparently realized that she said something that was offensive to some people. She apologized for it. It was over. You're right. That's the right way to do it. But she's the kind of falls in the category of dumb mistake, or I think Ed Schultz back in the day, about a year or two ago, he said something. He called somebody. It might have been Michelle Bachmann. They called her a slut, I think. And that's one of those things where it's okay.
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
That's unacceptable. Now Ed Schultz, he's kind of a blowhard. He's been a blowhard for years. He just sits there all day long,
and a hypocrite,
ranting all day long about people. He doesn't have. It's not a very high quality show. I know he's playing up the whole union thing, but honestly, I think he poorly represents unions because he makes them sound like they're substanceless people who just yell at their televisions all day. Then he says this thing about calling somebody a slut. Now that was probably he just probably thought it and didn't realize that when you're on the air constantly all the time, this has happened to every television show host that has any airtime who has to fill that airtime. You just say things that you don't maybe necessarily mean. You say dumb things. One of these days, and I'm sure we've already done it. One of us, Mr. Senator, are going to get in trouble. The only difference being that nobody listens to us. And nobody's going to be in an outrage when you or I say something.
That's one benefit. One
benefit, yes. So the stupid comments.
I'm sure one of our listeners, one of the 5, will be offended by something I said.
I'm sure that there are already people out there, if they were to listen to this, would be offended, and that's just part of being in the public space. You cannot have an opinion and not be offensive to someone. And I think that we need to get over. I think the outrage machine is stupid when it comes to people who make comments that are just stupid comments that are clearly mistakes. They're clearly good people that didn't intend to say what they said, or just having a bad day, or I think the one time Chris Matthews said something, he had been on the air for 13 hours straight because I think it was the presidential election or something like that. So you got to give these people a little bit of credit about the things that they say. Now, the intentional stuff I don't give people any credit for. There's one, or I don't want to say, but the intentional stuff, I think it's fine to be outraged about, because these people aren't apologizing. These people are clearly mean what they say, and all of a sudden it becomes a battle over values. It becomes a battle over, does the other side of this debate, or whatever other sides there are to this debate, do they want to protest the person who's saying these things? And sometimes that answer is yes, because what's at stake is so important at the time, or from the perspective of those people. It's such a critical issue, like women's rights for Rush Limbaugh, that struck a chord with people because of the impact of women's rights that his statements seem to make. I wanted to go one final thing I wanted to say, and I don't have anything. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else, but I think I want to take the entitlement issue in a different kind of way. I think people feel entitled because they want to feel superior. To me, this is the same mechanism as when we sit around, we kind of gossip, or I try not to do this because I find it to be petty and petulant, but people sit around and they gossip about so-and-so, and, oh, did you hear they said this about so-and-so, and, oh, God, why would they say such a thing, and that's ridiculous, and they should know better, and blah, 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 blah. You hear all this gossip all the time about people, negative, two-faced talking about somebody else behind their back. And, maybe they said something dumb. Maybe we've all said something dumb, right? And people feel entitled to complain about it and to be outraged about it, but it's hypocritical, because these same people are going to have said stupid things. Like, I can sit here and I can say that I feel entitled to say something about how inappropriate Martin Bashir's comment was, but you never know what somebody might say if you have a talk show like that. I might say something stupid. In fact, I'm sure I'd say something stupid.
Right.
So, when we act like these people are jerks, or we act like these people are idiots, or we say things like this politician's an idiot, or this talk show person's an idiot, or whatever it is, we're trying to make ourselves be superior. Oh, I'm superior. I would never do that. I would never say something that stupid. Listen.
Right.
Listen, you would. You have. You will. Again and again and again. The only difference is this person was on public airwaves when they said it. And, so these people who are out there who feel so entitled all the time to be outraged about this, that, and the other thing, unless it's an intentional comment that somebody made and they're not backing off of it, they're not apologizing. If it's just a dumb, stupid thing that they said and they're trying to apologize for it, like you said, let the Melissa Harris Perry thing be a lesson. Let this apologize, mean it, and then if you're the person who was offended, accept their apology and move on. We have bigger issues to deal with in this country. Maybe this is an example, Mr. Senator, of something we shouldn't talk about.
You said what?
I said maybe this is an example of something.
Maybe it's an example of what?
We shouldn't talk about. This is the name of this program is We Should Talk. And maybe, and this is an instance of times when we shouldn't talk.
Yeah. Well said. I don't have anything to add to that.
All right. Well, let's end this episode, this outrageous episode of We Should Talk. I am Solaris.
I am Mr. Senator.
Have a good one, Mr. Senator. Have a good one, everybody else.